This year, for the centerpiece of our First World War centennial commemoration, we have a very special Killed in Action tribute. In 2008, this post began recognizing local fallen members of our nation's armed forces with a Killed in Action tribute to better connect this ceremony to the meaning of Memorial Day. These are the stories of our young men and women, our sons and our daughters, who we send off to fight and win our nation's wars on distant shores. 2017 marked the centennial of the start of the United States involvement in what we know today as the First World War. It is a war that at best you will get a passing reference to in high school, and history majors in college and graduate school will probably never even encounter a single class on it. Yet it is a war, perhaps more so than the Second World War a mere 21 years later, that defined the 20th century. It was a war that Europe stumbled into. Beginning in August of 1914, everybody said it would be over by Christmas, yet it would continue for over 4 years. This war was a war of firsts. It was the first time that a war was fought on the land, on the sea, and in the air. The first use of tanks, flamethrowers, poison gas, submarines, modern battleships in combat. By 1917, the year of America's entry, every major European power of the day was involved, and all were literally being bled dry. The better part of an entire generation of European men were dead on the battlefields of France, Italy, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Russia, modern-day Turkey, Greece, the Middle East, on the islands of the Pacific, and on every ocean. By war's end, there would be over 18 million dead, 23 million wounded, 4 empires had ceased to exist, and the map of Europe and the world was changed forever. Young men and women from Millerton, New York had a part to play in this global drama, unfolding an ocean and a world away. Into this inferno stepped 2 young men from Millerton. One, a U.S. Marine by the name of William J. McLaughlin, Jr., and a U.S. Army soldier, John Kyle Smith. William J. McLaughlin, Jr. was born August 21, 1888, to William and Mary McLaughlin. Young William's maternal grandfather, Joseph McGee, the progenitor of the McGee family here in Millerton, had immigrated from Scotland in the 1850s. He served in the 150th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, taking part in some of the fiercest battles of the war, including Gettysburg, Chattanooga, Lookout Mountain, Atlanta, and Sherman's March to the Sea. Little is known about William Jr.'s early years, other than he was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and had an older sister named Agnes. His mother, Mary, died early in his life when William was a year and a half old. The record is mostly silent until 1916, when William, now age 28, decided to enlist into the United States Marine Corps, a decision that pleased his Civil War veteran grandfather, Joseph, immensely. Initially assigned to the new dreadnought battleship USS North Dakota, things rapidly changed for William and the nation when on April 6, 1917, Congress, following the request of President Wilson on April 2nd, officially declared war on Imperial Germany and entered the Great War on the side of the Entente. Within a week, he was reassigned to the 77th Company of the 6th Machine Gun Battalion, then being formed at Quantico, Virginia. The 6th Machine Gun Battalion would constitute part of the 4th Marine Brigade, which when complete was attached to the U.S. Army's newly created 2nd Division. By the end of the year, William, with his brigade and the rest of the 2nd Division, would join the 1st and 26th Divisions in France, where General John J. Pershing was organizing the American Expeditionary Force. From the little personal correspondence we have, and the clues from the local newspaper accounts, it appears that William was a prolific writer and distinguishes himself as a leader, able to keep a cool head under fire. From March 1918 onward, with a brief exception in August of that year for reasons unknown, William spent the entire war on the front lines, taking part in nearly every major battle and campaign that the American Expeditionary Force took part in. His service included a battle that helped define the United States Marine Corps as a fighting force and shook the confidence of the Imperial German Army to its core, the Battle of Belleau Wood. By October 1918, William, now a corporal and responsible for a machine gun squad within his company, took part in what would prove to be the last great American offensive of the war, the Meuse-Argonne. During William's great adventures, our other Millerton resident was not idle. John Kyle Smith was born to Frank and Mary Smith in Tivoli, New York on December 3rd, 1888, and within a decade would find himself the oldest of 6 children. From the state and federal census records of the time, we know that John went to school in Red Hook with his siblings. Following, he worked to support his family, and sometime between 1910 and 1915, John moved to Millerton to live with his uncle Frederick, who had a house on Elm Avenue and a shoe store here on Main Street. This is where John was working in 1917 when the United States entered the Great War. On June 5th of that year was a historic day where all the young men from all across the United States reported to their local draft boards to register for the draft. John was one of them. And on his draft registration card, we can find his uncle's signature as the certifying official. Nearly a year later, John received his draft notice, and on May 25th, 1918, he reported with a number of other young men from Millerton to Millbrook, New York, where he was officially enlisted into the United States Army. By June 30th, a mere 26 days later, John, along with fellow Millerton residents Santa Anna Finkel, William G. Simmons, and George A. Evans, were on the same troop ship, the SS Mercury, with several other Dutchess County residents on their way to France. After a few short months of training, John found himself assigned in October of 1918 to the 320th Infantry Regiment, part of the 80th Division, as a replacement soldier for the losses that the division had already sustained in combat. On the night of October 31st and into the wee early morning hours of November 1st, the 80th Division relieved elements of the 82nd to take their place on the line immediately adjacent to the 2nd Division and the 4th Marine Brigade. The morning of November 1st, 1918, found Marine Corporal William McLaughlin and Army Private John Smith within 10 miles of each other. At 0430, the American artillery opened on the German positions just yards away. The infantry assault began at 0630 and for that morning. For Corporal McLaughlin, this experience of going over the top was absolutely nothing new. For Private John Smith, it was his very first time. For both, it would be their last. What happened to John, we may never know. The record so far has been silent, with the only indication being a notation on his service record that he was killed somewhere north of St. Juven. For William, we have a record of the events of that morning from a letter written to William's sister Agnes by his good friend Guy Moore, who wrote her that letter.
I'll give her one more.
And that letter was published on March 6, 1919 in the Millerton Telegram, the local paper of the day. Dear Mrs. Dignan, I am writing as a friend of your brother. We promised to write each other. He was killed November 1st at 6:30 a.m., just as we went over the top on the Meuse-Argonne front. He had just fired a machine gun barrage for the infantry to advance when we started forward. He was leading us through a storm of German shells when he was hit. I was only 30 feet behind him, and when I got to him, it was thankfully all over. So thank God he didn't suffer and was not mangled like so many else have. He had charge of my squad since the St. Neil Drive. After all he went through, it seems hard to think that we're but 10 days more, and this is fate. I have a remembrance which he got in Chateau Thierry, and will mail it to you. He carried it till he went on the last drive, and gave it to a teamster to keep for him, but I have it now. His friend, Guy E. Moore, U.S. Marine Corps. P.S. Please accept the deepest regard from the 77th Company. Mrs. Degnan, many have paid the price, but none more brave than he, and he was loved by his company. As the letter indicates, the war just ended 10 days later, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, when the guns finally fell silent, 1,564 days since the war had begun. Following the war, the families of both William and John received correspondence from the War Department regarding the permanent disposition of their loved ones' remains. Both families elected to have their remains returned to the United States. Corporal McLaughlin lies at rest here in Irondale Cemetery, next to his father, William Sr., just a few headstones away from his mother, Mary, and her family. John's remains were returned to the United States in July of 1921, and though the grave is currently unknown, we believe rests somewhere in Red Hook. After the war, these men were not forgotten. William's sister Agnes kept his memory alive long after he had gone to his eternal rest, as she was an active part of American Legion Auxiliary Unit 178 here in Millerton, serving in a number of positions. In 1934, as noted in the April 19, 1934 edition of the Harlan Valley Times, she presented a beautiful gavel and bell to the unit in memory of her brother Corporal W.J. McLaughlin, who made the supreme sacrifice over there during the war. The World War veterans of Tivoli and Red Hook would not let the memory of their native son pass away, naming their new Legion post in his honor. Tributes like this take a numerous amount of effort, and this one was certainly no different. I would like to personally at this time thank the efforts of the Dutchess County Historical Society and our own local Northeast Historical Society, who both each contributed greatly in the collecting of information needed to make this tribute possible. And to each of them, I owe a deep and heartfelt thanks.
Still clapping.
At this time, I would like to turn it over once again.